Hi. In this lesson, we're going to discuss the order of operations and simplifying numerical expressions. So this is just some basic knowledge that will help you as you move through your math classes. When you're simplifying an expression, you need to do so in a certain order. This order or sequence that you follow is called the order of operations. A helpful acronym that people have is Pemdas, or they might think, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, or something like that. That tells you the order that you should do the operations that you see within the expression. So the first thing is the P, that stands for parentheses, and really it's just any grouping symbol. So it could also be brackets, braces, absolute value bars, radicals, and I mean like the stuff within the radical versus the stuff outside the radical. And remember, the radical symbol is like a square root sign. And then fraction bars, your numerator versus your denominator. So the first thing you're going to do is look and see if there's any kind of grouping and take care of groups first. Next, you're going to do the exponents. That's the E. Radicals are really exponents in disguise, so radicals are associated with exponents, so you would do those next. Then multiplication and division. So those are equal operations, and you would work from left to right on any multiplication or division you see. And then addition and subtraction are equal operations. So you would work from left to right and get rid of the addition and subtraction as you go. So let's try a few. We have the first one. 1 plus 7 times 5 minus 5 squared over 5 minus 8. So the first thing we should look for is any grouping symbols, the parentheses. So we have one little parentheses, but that's just around a 5. Really what we're looking for here is the grouping, which is this fraction bar. So we would need to do the top and the bottom separately. So we're going to simplify the top of the fraction, which is the numerator, and we're going to simplify the bottom of the fraction, which is the denominator. All right, so we will have 1 plus. On the top, we do exponents first. So I will go ahead and do that. Notice the only thing squared here is the 5. So it's not a -5 times a -5. The square only applies to the 5. So you bring down the negative and then do the 5 squared. So the 5 squared gives you 25. Okay, and then on the bottom, we'll just bring that down. So then we have 1 plus, I can do the multiplication now on the top. So that'll be 35 minus 25. And on the bottom, I can go ahead and do that. The 5 minus 8 is -3. Because remember, those are grouped separately. So the top is a group and the bottom is a group. Okay, 1 plus, I still have to finish my grouping. So that's the numerator. So 35 minus 25 would give us 10 over -3. Okay, so now I have 1 plus 10 over -3. So -3 will not go into 10 evenly. So I can find a common denominator and add these together. The 10/3 will not reduce. But notice I have a plus and then I have a positive 10 divided by a -3. So those two signs are going to end up becoming a minus. So this is the same as 1 minus 10/3. Okay? And so now I want to find a common denominator. Remember that any whole number, or really any integer, you can put over 1. So this, I could write 1 as 1 over 1. Because remember, anything divided by 1 is itself. So this is equivalent. Now what I want to do is, remember, when you're adding or subtracting fractions, you have to have a common denominator. So my denominators are 1 and 3. So the common denominator here would be 3. So I need to scale up the first fraction so that the denominator is 3. So to do that, I would multiply by 3. And whatever you do to the bottom, you have to do to the top as well so that it's an equivalent fraction. You're not changing the value. So this would be 3 over 3 minus 10 over 3. Notice that 3 over 3, if you divide that out, that's 1. So it's still equivalent to what we had originally. And now you would simply subtract since you have a common denominator. So you subtract the tops. 3 minus 10 would give you a negative 7, and you keep the denominator the same. So negative 7/3 would be your simplified expression. Let's look at number 2. So the second one, we have a lot of parentheses and brackets, so we need to figure out what to do first. So let's look at the first set. So let's look these brackets, right? So that includes everything in red. So I'm going to look at that first. Notice that I have another grouping over here that I'm coloring in blue, right? The second grouping. So the first grouping, I'm going to look inside that bracket, and notice I have more parentheses right here, so I'm going to do that first. So 6 minus 9 is negative 3. Okay, everything else I can just bring down. Now, if you wanted to go ahead and do the blue, the grouping, the negative 8 plus 1, you could do that because it's a separate group. And so you're going to be reducing or simplifying within each group. So that's fine to do. Okay, so now negative 3 squared. Notice the negative 3 is in parentheses. This means that in this case, the whole negative 3 is raised to the second power. This is negative 3 times negative 3, unlike the previous one where there were no parentheses around the negative 5, right? It was just a 5. So negative 3 times negative 3 is a positive 9. Okay, minus negative 8 plus 1. All right, now I can do the subtraction or addition, right, in each group. So 9 minus 2 is 7, minus negative 8 plus 1 is negative 7, right? You have a negative 8 and a positive 1. Since those are different signs, you subtract and keep the sign of the larger number. 8's bigger than 1, so you keep that negative, right? You can also think of this as being $8 in debt and then earning $1, so now you're only $7 in debt. Okay, so now I have 7 minus a negative 7. Two negatives back to back become a positive. So this is really 7 plus 7. And then we know that that is 14. So this expression for number 2 simplifies to 14. Okay, so I have 2 more examples to do with you, number 3 and number 4. At the bottom, I have a link to a website. I used some of these problems and some of the wording from this document I got from this OpenStax resource. So please check out the OpenStax textbook. There are a lot more examples if you need to practice on the order of operations or simplifying expressions. This is a great place to go. And they do have the answers to all of their odd problems. So a really good resource for extra practice. All right, number 3. This one looks more complicated, right? So first, we're just going to take it step by step. We're going to do the parentheses. So all I'm going to look at right now is everything that's in between those parentheses. So let's start there. I'm going to bring down the 1/2. Inside the parentheses, I have 2 different exponents. Remember, exponents come first. Don't make the mistake of multiplying 5 times 3 first. Even though it looks like you could do that, you can't. You've got to do the exponents first. So we're going to bring down the 5. 3 squared is 9. This 4 is not in parentheses. So the exponent of 2 only applies to the 4, not the negative. So we bring down the minus. 4 squared is 16. And then we're going to bring the other stuff down. Okay, We're going to keep working inside the parentheses. So 1/2, we've got to do multiplication first, so that'll be 45 minus 16. Bring down the other stuff. And then 45 minus 16, that is what, 39/29, I believe. Bring down the other stuff. Okay, so now we have simplified everything within the parentheses, so we can do any exponents that are left. That would be the 9 squared. So 1/2 times, I'm going to take these parentheses away and write 29 as a fraction. Remember, you can write it as a fraction by writing it over 1. So this will be times 29 over 1 plus 1/3 times 9 squared is 81. And I'm going to write that as a fraction as well. So 81 over 1. Remember, again, you can do this with any whole number or any integer in order to make it easier to see what you need to do next. Now I want to take care of any multiplication or division. So you can see I'm multiplying here and I'm multiplying here. When you're multiplying fractions, you can simply multiply straight across. So top times top and bottom times bottom. So 1 times 29 and 2 times 1. So you end up with 29 over 2. Plus, you can multiply straight across, or alternatively, you can also simplify any top with any bottom. So remember, if you have the same factor, for example, a 3 on top and a 3 on bottom, those would divide out to 1. So you can look to see if you have any common factors. 81 is actually 27 times 3. So 3 divided by 3 is 1, and 81 divided by 3 is 27. So I've divided a number from the top and a number from the bottom by a common factor. I divided them both by 3. That allows me to reduce prior to multiplying, which makes it easier for me in the end. This is not something that you have to do here. You could have just multiplied straight across and got 81 over 3, and then the 81 over 3 you would have to reduce, which you're going to see is going to reduce the same way that this did. This technique, though, is useful when you start trying to simplify rational expressions. So that would be like a fraction with expressions and variables in it. You will see that this technique is going to be used there. But for now, you can do either one you want. You can either cross reduce like I did, or you can multiply straight across and reduce in the end. So if I multiply now, I have 27 times 1, which is 27. And then on the bottom, I have 1 times 1. Now, rather than simplifying this 27 over 1, I'm going to look and see if I can reduce the 29 over 2, which I cannot. So now, in order to combine those, I need to have a common denominator. So my denominators are 2 and 1. The common denominator would be 2. That means I need to scale up my second fraction by 2 because I need the bottoms to match the other bottom. So I'm going to multiply by 2 over 2. Okay, so this will give me 29 over 2 plus 27 times 2 is 54. 1 times 2 is 2. I now have the same denominator, so I simply add straight across the top. So it'll be 783 over 2. That will not reduce, so that should be your answer. Go ahead and start working with the fractions. So I'm starting right away with the fractions, and that's just because we're going to see fractions a lot. So we might as well start reminding ourselves how to work with fractions, how to add, subtract, multiply, divide, etc. Because we'll be seeing a lot of these, okay? Always make sure you put your fractions in lowest terms. That's already done here, but if you need to reduce, you should do so. Okay, our final example. We have the square root of 25 minus 4 squared plus 7 times 5 minus 4 squared. So first thing is parentheses. Remember, parentheses means any grouping. So one of the groupings is under a radical. So this 25 minus 4 squared is a grouping. So we want to completely simplify everything under that square root. And then another grouping, a more obvious one, is the parentheses. So we'll do those two things first. So under the radical, we have the square root of 25 minus 4 squared. The square only applies to the 4 because there are no parentheses, so we bring down the minus, and 4 squared is 16. Okay, and then I can go ahead and do the other grouping. So 5 minus 4 is 1. All right, continue under the radical. 25 minus 16 is 9. Okay, now I'm going to simplify the radical. So the second step is the exponents, and remember that means any exponents or radicals. So the square root of 9 is 3 plus 1 squared, that's the exponent I want to do, so bring down the 7, and then 1 squared is just 1. 1 times 1 is 1. Multiplication and division are next. So you'll see 7 times 1 is the only multiplication step I have. So I can multiply and get 7. And then I'm simply going to add 3 plus 7 and get the 10.